Hi, my name is Don Stanek, and I'm your instructor for New Home Certified Professional. For the sake of this series, we're going to break the builders who might be operating in your market into three main categories. You've got large national brands, you've got regional companies, and then you've got local builders. And by the time you're done with this chapter, you're going to be able to identify the differences between these three types of builders. More importantly, you're going to understand how you might more efficiently approach these types of builders to be able to maximize your prospect list. So let's get started. First, let's cover national builders. Large national builders might be familiar to you if you live in the Sun Belt or you live in a county north of the Sun Belt that's got more than 1 million people in it. And here's why. They have a tendency to be publicly held companies, and they like even flow production, and they like cash flow on a regular and consistent basis. And so if you're operating in an environment that is going to have issues with delivery of homes because of weather or snow or climate, it's going to be difficult for you to predict what your income is going to be and your cash flow quarter over quarter. So this is why you've got large name brand companies like KB Home, Pulte, D.R. Horton, Lennar, Richmond American, and there's dozens of others that are public companies kind of operating in that Sun Belt. So Phoenix, Dallas, California, Southern California, Atlanta, Miami, that's where Lennar started. And so why is that? Because the climate is really, really conducive to being able to build homes year-round. Now, I mentioned that there's an exception to that. So if you start drifting north, what happens is if you're in an area, a county or a city or a metropolis that's got a lot of people in it, say Chicago or Denver, right, or Minneapolis, you have a kind of a different sort of a setup because the size of the population, a public builder can still kind of account for the fact that they might not be delivering homes every quarter, every month, every quarter, every month. But they can kind of budget around that because they know that there's kind of going to be a construction season, and they can produce a lot more homes in that construction season. So they start structuring themselves to be able to do that. Some of the other fundamental differences around a large public company, home builder, and other companies are that they usually have some sort of national identity, national brand. So although they have some kind of national brand and identity, they still kind of operate with little tiny companies within them. And those are usually called home building divisions, and they're run by a division president. So at the national level, what are they doing? Well, they might be writing national contracts with vendors like General Electric or Whirlpool or Square D or Simpson or any of these other companies that are providing building materials, supplies, or fit and finish on a national platform. This is going to reduce their cost dramatically. Another thing that they're doing at the national level, and the most important thing, is they're raising money. Fundamentally, their job is to raise the capital that's necessary for the division to be able to operate. So public companies raise money through stock offerings and a couple of other more complicated ways. But at the end of the day, it's the national part of the company is raising money for a local home building developer. Now, these companies are usually pretty large, and they usually are pretty dominant in the areas that they do business. So what this means is, take the Denver metro area. There's some large home builders in there, and they don't have one or two communities. They have 10, 20, 15, 30 neighborhoods that are operating within a specific area. So these large public companies kind of break themselves into that way. So what's great about that is you don't have to get involved at the highest levels. You really just have to get involved at the neighborhood level. Large public companies know that all real estate is local, and so this is why they divide themselves down into that way. Large national builders usually have their own in-house sales professionals. In fact, more times out of not, they like to do this because they're trying to create some sort of standardization in their sales process. And also, let's be honest, it probably saves them a little bit of money to be able to have these people in-house. So this naturally sets up some potential confusion or conflict with folks who are members of the National Association of Realtors, member of your state board, member of your local board. Here's why. These in-house sales professionals working as employees for the home builder, they may or may not be licensed depending on the state you operate in. And more importantly, they're almost never members of NAR or your state board association or your local board of realtors. So why is this? Why? Because they function much more like in a retail environment. People come to their office, which is usually located in a sales center in a model complex. These large builders might have 2 or 3 or 4 model homes, which are samples of the floor plans that they offer and samples of fit and finish. Now, it's pretty convenient because they're usually open 5 to 7 days a week. You can go there and preview the property. You can talk to the sales professionals, and certainly it's easy for you to be able to bring a buyer to that environment. And this is good. This is all good. Now, the complexity is that the vocabulary they use, the documents that they use, and their processes and procedures might not line up exactly with what your traditional understanding is for selling a resale home. Now, this doesn't mean that they're inferior or worse. They're just kind of fundamentally operating in a different environment. Now, we're going to talk also about some of the opportunities that this poses. If they're not members of NAR, then do they have access to the MLS? Probably not. Now, maybe somebody in the main office has access to the MLS, someone in a marketing capacity who is putting the homes on the MLS for sale. Sometimes there's issues and confusion around that because they're not realtors. They don't truly understand some of the rules and the guidelines associated with the MLS. If you're working with a large home builder and you're bringing buyers to a large home builder, please, please, please do me a favor. Make sure you preview the properties that they have listed on the MLS first. Sometimes what they're doing is listing a model home, and it's not exactly the house that's specifically for sale. Now, sometimes they're listing a lot of additional addresses. Some of them might be finished homes, some of them might be under construction, and some of them might be dirt. And so what they'll do is they'll put an artist rendering in the photograph section of the MLS, or they'll say model looks similar to, or property looks similar to. You need to check with the rules and the guidelines of your specific MLS to really understand this. But for gosh sakes, go and preview the property first. More times than I care to experience, I might have go and take a look at a property. I've identified the MLS. It's got photographs. I show up, and the home doesn't exist. Whoops. Why is that? It's because the person who's managing their MLS is just using another photograph of the model home or photograph of some of their property. Do your homework, go there first. You could be angry with them because they're abuse of the MLS system, or what you could do is just have pity on them. Realize, hey, they don't really get it. They use they're using the MLS to promote their material, but not all of them really have a strong command and control understanding of what that is. Now, some do, so I'm not throwing them all under the bus. But if you're a buyer's agent bringing people to new homes, just realize that if it's a large public builder, they don't really function like you do. They don't have an office environment like you do. Large public builders are structured much more just like a traditional large national company, like we had mentioned. So they're broken down into divisions. So they've got purchasing department, and they've got operations department, the person who builds the house. They've got legal, right? They've got maybe a sales and marketing director, maybe a vice president of sales and marketing. They many times have a warranty department, and this means they take care of fit and finish issues and other types of issues post-closing, which is really convenient for you and your customer. Here's what I'd love to see you do. Please go out of your way and visit some of these sales centers. If they're operating, if this type of thing is operating in your marketplace, it's a really good opportunity to make a relationship with that sales professional and use that person as a prospecting methodology, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So the assignment is you want to go and you want to be able to make friends with that salesperson in that location. You want to have an understanding of what their inventory is and what their process is, and you want to go make friends. Believe you me, if you work with a lot of buyers and there's a lot of large home builders that are in your county or in your general location. Your home buyers are going to stumble into those offices. And here's what's going to happen is that you're going to be busy doing something else, or you're going to be having an open house, you're going to be helping another client, and on a Saturday afternoon, Bill and Sally are sitting and they're thinking, gosh, you know what, I saw those flags, that large public builder up the street, and they said grand opening, there's balloons and all this other stuff, and they have advertising on the radio, and there's all this other types of advertising. And so guess what, they're going to wander into that sales office. And so do yourself a favor, make sure you've done everything correctly so that at some point in the future they don't buy a house and you get cut out of that process. Most of the larger nationally branded builders are going to have some sort of model display or model complex that you can walk through and take a look at what they're offering. So this is going to range in size depending on the type of offering, depending on the number of homes that are in the specific community and the number of floor plans. It might be as simple as they build one home in advance and the sales office is put in the garage, or maybe the sales office is integrated into the house. Some of these model complexes can get pretty large and pretty sophisticated. So you could have a separate sales office building and 4 or 5 display homes to walk through. This is a great opportunity for you to get a good understanding of what does this builder really provide. You could get a good idea of the quality of construction, but also it's an opportunity for you to ask more questions. If you're with a sales professional walking through these model complexes, one of the things you really want to be keenly aware of is what's included and what's not included. Home builders, particularly large home builders, have a tendency to throw a lot of money into their model homes in terms of fit and finish and extras and options. They're also trying to stratify the offering, because if you have 4 or 5 different floor plans offered within a specific community, what you're trying to do is really kind of dial in and target maybe a couple of different demographics of potential customer that might be attracted to that location. And so they always have, the copper, the silver, the gold, the platinum, the double platinum, the triple platinum, plus extras. As you're walking through these model complexes, ask for a list of standard features and options, and then also maybe try to get an estimated idea of what some of the extras might cost. A big one's going to be flooring, because sometimes they'll put these beautiful stone floors in a brand new home, in a model home, and you're walking through, and maybe the house is $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, and the floor maybe is another $100,000. What? It happens. What they're trying to do is just make a big splash impression. You should be able to see what the standard flooring is. They should have some sort of display inside the sales center that says, oh, and this is your standard flooring. And, usually it's basic flooring and it's basic carpet. It might even be sheet vinyl. It might be tile in the wet surface, in the wet areas like the bathrooms and the laundry room. But it might be vinyl. What are they doing here? They're trying to encourage you to spend more money on flooring. So be careful with this, because the natural tendency for the in-home sales professionals say, well, you can add it to your loan. Can you? Maybe you can and maybe you can't. So it just sort of depends. If you load up this house with all this additional fit and finish, is it going to appraise? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Is your buyer going to have some kind of unpleasant surprise where they're going to have to come up with additional money in order to close? Man, I sure hope not. That would be terrible. It does happen. Be sensitive to this. What's included, what's not included. In addition to the flooring upgrade, which is usually pretty substantial, landscaping is the next big thing. Now, with some home builders, as part of the MAP condition when they go through the approval process with the city, they might have a requirement to say you have to put in the front yard sod and you have to put in a tree. And so you've probably seen this experience where you're driving through a brand new neighborhood and you see these little tiny 5-gallon trees, 5-gallon tree, 5-gallon tree. Why? Because it's a requirement that they probably had to do by the city, and they're all exactly the same size, and they're all the exact. And so brace your customer for the fact that what landscaping is included, what it's not included. Make sure you do a quick thumbnail budget idea of what those additional expenses might be. I really recommend that if you're going to represent somebody with a new home, purchase that I'm sure you have friends, or you go make a friend who's a landscaper, and just to ask them, hey, I need kind of a general landscaping idea of what this kind of would cost. And so simple conceptual drawing, I'm not asking you to spend any money, but you should probably have a good relationship with a landscaper anyway. If you've been in the business longer than 20 minutes, they should be one of your business partners. So get that done so that you can start estimating what that's going to be. What you don't want to have happen is have your buyer close on a brand new house and then just kind of have, this beautiful home, and it's got beautiful flooring, and there's dirt in the front yard, there's dirt in the backyard. If there is no landscaping required and there's a homeowners association, you can better believe that the association probably is going to say you need to get this installed within X number of time after you close, 6 months, a year, maybe less. A lot of times you're going to have to provide drawings to the homeowners association, depending on the type of homeowners association it is, to get approval for your landscape, and particularly for hardscape. So if you're doing stonework or adding electrical lighting or doing all these things. So what you want to do is be educated. You want to ask the sales professional, hey, these model homes are beautiful, but what's included? What's the art of the achievable? And you really want to prepare your buyer for the fact that they're going to probably spend extra money on flooring, and they're definitely going to probably spend more money on landscaping. All right, let's talk a little bit now about paperwork and deposits. So I mentioned that these folks are not necessarily a part of the National Association of Realtors, which means they're not part of the state board either, and they're not part of the local board. Now, guess what? Many times they use their own purchase agreement. In fact, I think almost every public company or every large national brand that I've ever dealt with across the country all has their own paperwork. This is sometimes inherently a problem for you if you're a realtor and if you're used to using pre-printed regular forms that you're getting from your state board. Usually your paperwork's controlled by the state association in cooperation with the licensing bureau, and they kind of figure out best wording and best practices. Some of the stuff is national requirements, some of the stuff is state, maybe even some local stuff sprinkled in there, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. So don't get frustrated. You're going to go to this large home builder and you're not writing the offer. Da-da! The odds are really good that you're not writing the offer. What you're doing is you're presenting a buyer on their first visit and you are registering them. And what this is witness of procuring cause. So you can't really have evidence that you presented an offer and you're the procuring cause. So how do you ensure that? Well, large home builders want you to register their customer on their first visit, and this policy varies widely across the country. But if you've made a pre-visit to the sales office and you've asked this question, you're not going to be confused about what the registration process is, and you're not going to get cut out of the process, and you're not going to get necessarily cut out of the commission or the referral fee, if they're in fact doing that, which I hope they are. So guess what? You're not writing the offer, which means they're not using your paperwork, which means you don't have any control over the paperwork. But what you do have the ability to do is, on that visit, when you go and talk to that sales professional, before you bring your customer, before you bring your buyer there, ask for a sample packet of the types of documents that they can expect when they do bring their buyer. This way, you can get a sample packet of the documents that they're probably going to use when it comes time for your buyer to write a purchase agreement in the sales office. Now, don't get overwhelmed, but the truth of the matter is those documents are going to probably be a much thicker package than you're used to, because there's disclosure information in there and there's all other sorts of requirements that large builders maybe have to have in terms of disclosure. And so the disclosure goes on and on and on. A lot of times you're going to see that these documents are kind of repetitious in terms of what they say. But they still have provisions in them. Those provisions are legally binding. Even though you might not be familiar with that specific contract, it doesn't mean it's not a contract. So the best thing you can do for your buyer is to read it. Read it, read it, read it. If you have questions, ask the sales professional. Many of the provisions that you see in there are going to be similar to contracts that you see in any other industry, including real estate, like liquidated damages. It's important that you have a very clear understanding what would happen if in fact your buyer canceled. Is their deposit at risk? If so, what's the amount? What's the policy and the procedure around possible refunds? If your customer had to leave additional deposits for change orders or custom options and left those deposits up front, they cancel, what happens to that money, right? Here's the key. Just don't be surprised about the process and be as informed as possible so that when you do articulate this stuff to your buyer, that there's clarity, that you understand it, you're confident, and you're able to provide the highest level of service and comfort that you possibly can with your customer. Now, the other aspect is because you didn't initiate the paperwork, I'm pretty much 100% convinced that whatever brokerage that you're operating in has got specific requirements about how you handle paperwork. So when you write an offer and the offer gets accepted and it goes off to a transaction settlement company, if you're in an escrow state, it goes to escrow. But what are the paperwork requirements that your broker requires in-house? I think there's a great opportunity here for you to have a little discussion with your broker of record and just ask them, hey, I'm going to go, I'm showing houses. One of those properties is at a large national home builder. They have their own contract. When it comes to that policy and procedure, what do you need from us? Like, I know I need agency probably signed is probably a good idea, and there's a bunch of other things that are state requirements. I would say that probably a lot of that stuff is covered within the standardized purchase agreement, but it might not be. It might not be. Here's the thing. Ask your broker. Ask your broker. Ask your office manager. Make sure that you're in compliance with your brokerage and make sure all your paperwork is going to be settled to the point at which they're satisfied. Because if they're not satisfied with your file, guess what? You're probably not going to get paid. Take the time, take the effort, do your homework, don't have any surprises, and make sure you're providing a high level of service and understanding and education to your home buyer. Unlike resale transactions, you're going to have to deal with timeline and building sequence. Now, what happens is if you do represent a buyer in the purchase of a house, not just with a large national or regional or a local, that property might be a standing inventory home, at which point it's a pretty easy, straightforward purchase because probably not a lot of choices can be made about fit and finish changes. In fact, home builders don't like to make changes after the fact because it costs money and then there's no guarantee that your buyer's going to close, and it just creates some complexity. So is your home buyer purchasing the house as a finished product? Is it halfway finished? It's got roof sheeting and framing, but nothing else. Or are they buying a piece of dirt? They might be buying a piece of dirt from a large home builder, a small home builder, or someplace in between. The large home builder's not going to produce a custom house. They're going to have somewhat cookie cutter floor plans, somewhat cookie cutter fit and finish packages. But the timeline, how long is it going to take for that home builder to go from dirt to handing keys out to your buyer? Depending on the size of the house, depending on the home builder, and depending on where they're located in the country, these construction sequencing schedules vary greatly. But an expectation that seems pretty reasonable if you're buying or representing the buyer in a 1,700 square foot home, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage. A national builder should be able to start to end complete that house in about 120 days. It seems fast, and it's pretty fast, and the reason it's fast is because they have a lot of standardization in terms of the roof trusses, in terms of their basic floor plan. They probably use this floor plan over and over again in a variety of different communities. They're probably using the same subcontractors on the assembly, and that's what they are. It's an assembly line, and it only moves in one direction. But it's important for you to have this discussion with your customer. These transaction periods can take very long periods of time. Maybe you're building a custom home and your home buyer decides to buy a piece of dirt, hire an architect, hire a general contractor. So are they moving in tomorrow? No, they're not. There's going to be a certain amount of time and risk that's associated with that schedule. As someone who's representing that buyer, a best practice is to set up some sort of scheme of communication to understand how long it's going to take to get over the finish line. Because here's what happens when they sign a purchase agreement with the home builder in the sales office and the home's not done. In fact, it's maybe even not started. Let me ask you a question. Is that a home buyer still looking for homes? Yes. The odds are pretty good they are. Now, we've all experienced this with buyers who have long transaction periods of time. They're either going to stay enthused and excited, and they're going to go to the home site maybe every month and take a picture. Oh, look at the progress. Look at the progress. That's great. They're in love. Probably not a problem. But another thing happens sometimes, and that is if it's going to take 6 or 12 or 9 months for me to be able to deliver this home, I need to make sure that my customer is excited and enthused and informed each step along the way. I highly recommend that you're touching base with them really every week. You might not have anything to report, but they need to know that you're still there in the process, that they can count on you, and if they're having any kind of doubts, any kind of concerns, and any kind of questions, they could go right to the builder sales office. That's true. But I never want you to get really cut out of this communication entirely. At the end of the day, this client, this customer is yours. Even after they close, I want you to maintain a great relationship with them. I want you to provide a service level experience with them. So stay engaged, stay involved, and make sure that your customer, your buyer, staying engaged along the way too. In fact, even have this type of conversation with them. Bill, Sally, hey, look, today you bought a piece of dirt, congratulations. It's going to take some time. At times in the process, it's going to feel like it's going slow, and other times it's going to seem like there's a lot of progress. Each step along the way, let's have a conversation, let's have a touch base, just to make sure that things are happening in alignment with your expectations. I want to make sure you have the best buyer experience possible. My gosh, even if you just say that one little thing, it's going to mean the world when it comes to resolving any kind of issue. You're going to identify things early, and you're going to be able to get on those things early. So the timeline and the sequences are different in new home sales. Be aware of it and make an appropriate adjustment in your communication plan. If you're helping a buyer buy a brand new home, the walkthrough and the warranty and the post-closing activities are a little different. So I'm sure you're already familiar with basic home warranty. That's usually part of many transactions that we have all across the country. That it's kind of an insurance document that really gets purchased, and it's a $300, $500, or $1,000, whatever the number is, to kind of smooth out any kind of issues that might come up after the close, so that the person who's buying the house maybe is not as apt to have some of the kind of resolution with the person who sold the house, particularly if there's like some kind of small issue. And a lot of times we also have maybe a walkthrough or some kind of a final walkthrough, although sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't happen in resale. Now, it almost always happens in new homes, and here's why. Is because particularly with a large home builder, they have policies around, hey, you know what, we have a customer service department that implements the warranty, and here's what the warranty provisions are. I strongly recommend that you get a sample of this in advance, because some large builders will say, hey, we've got a 10-year warranty or a 15-year warranty. Maybe they do. Is every single thing in the house warranted for 10 years? Don't think so. And then also, all the appliances or things that are manufactured off-site that the builder didn't manufacture, probably going to come with their own manufacturer's warranties. When the walkthrough does happen for your new buyer, I recommend that you attend that walkthrough. And that doesn't mean that you're there necessarily, with blue taping the daylights out of everything. But what it does mean is that you're there, you're a representative, and you're helping that customer through this part of the transaction. It should be fun. There shouldn't be a lot of issues, but the point at which you're doing a homeowner walkthrough. But there are going to be some issues. Some of these issues might very well rise to the level of your buyer not wanting to close until these issues get taken care of. Please be careful. Make sure you've read the provisions of the contract and understand what is happening there. If your buyer is going to hold up the close because of some paint touch-up or because the door jamb needs to be adjusted, this might be a problem. It might be a problem for the home builder. Now, the truth of the matter is you want as many of these issues resolved before the closing as humanly possible, and there might very well be some issues that even you take a look at and say, I need to have a discussion with my buyer. If you could give me a second, right? So understand what the plan is to get these items resolved. Understand what the timeline is to get these things resolved. During the homeowner walkthrough process, usually a builder representative is taking notes and they're documenting, oh, this needs to be fixed, and this needs to be fixed, and this needs to be fixed. At the end of that walkthrough, you really need a copy of that document, and if for any reasons the builder representative doesn't want to give you a copy of that document, ask if you could take a picture of it with your phone. We want to create some urgency and some accountability around these fit and finish issues that get identified during the homeowner walkthrough. Working with a large home builder means they might be delivering 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 houses per year, and that customer service person that you're walking through the house with to do those fit and finish things might be overwhelmed, right? So you want to make sure that your customer is getting the best service they possibly can, and just because there's some paint touch-up, it doesn't seem like a very big deal for the warranty person, but it is a big deal, and it needs to be done in a timely manner so that it's in alignment with your customer's expectations. Go through this process and just make sure, read the document, make sure you understand what that process is so that when you have the conversation with your buyer, they also have a very complete understanding. There are a lot of great home builders out there, particularly some of the large national groups put a lot of money in their whole warranty program because they want to put it out there as a source of pride that we stand behind our home, we stand behind our product, we stand behind our process, we have a zero defect policy, and so they like to transmit a lot of this stuff into the public to create confidence. But also, if they're out there saying that stuff, as a realtor, as a real estate professional, you might want to hold them accountable to the things they say and mostly to the things that are in writing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about affiliated business relationships. So large national builders usually have their own in-house lenders. A lot of times they have their own transaction settlement companies. Sometimes they own a homeowner's insurance company, or they have an ownership interest in a homeowner's insurance company. Sometimes they have an ownership interest in an option or design center that's not necessarily branded to the specific home builder, but they have an ownership interest. And so if you have a large national company and you're using all these different related services in the transaction, then it's important for that national large home builder to be able to disclose these relationships because as your customer is going through that process, they're being touched by other professionals in the process that may or may not be generating profit or generating revenue for the home builder, and it's an ancillary part of the transaction. So when you want to know if a home builder says, hey, you have to apply with ABC Mortgage Company for us to get your paperwork started, ultimately you can use any lender that you want, but you need to pre-qualify with our lender. So that's a policy and a procedure. It's something you need to be aware of. Now, also, do you think the home builder, large national builder, has an interest in that mortgage company? Well, it might be obvious because it might be, Big Builder Mortgage Company, Inc. But it might not be so obvious that they're affiliated. Usually in the purchase agreement that you see in the sales office, you're going to find that you can get part of the document, say, hey, what are the companies, or can I see your affiliated business disclosure document, right? Get a sample of that. I think it's probably pretty important. Now, do the large builders do that because they're just, well, I want more profit, Tic Tacs, just keep eating those Tic Tacs. I need more. Maybe. Are they ugly? Maybe. But really, what they're originally trying to do is, hey, are they trying to make more profit? Yes, but they're also trying to standardize a customer experience so that when the customer comes, they can kind of have a really good control over the customer experience from end to end. The home builder doesn't understand who you're currently using for a mortgage lender. Maybe that mortgage lender is great, maybe they're not great. But the home builder wants to rest assured that there's a standardized process and they have a certain amount of understanding, awareness, and maybe even control over it. The other reason why large national companies do this is if they are closing 1,000, 3,000 houses every year, imagine the paperwork nightmare that would be associated with having to deal with 10 or 15 or 8 different transaction settlement companies, 4 different escrow companies, 5 different title companies, a half a dozen fit and finish companies, and 75 different mortgage lenders. So operationally, this becomes almost insurmountable for large builders. This is why they want to standardize the process. Now, there's also some potential benefit to you and your home buyer. Sometimes, depending on the market conditions, large home builders are going to offer an incentive for using certain services, and so probably not settlement services, but the big one is the mortgage lender. Hey, if you use our mortgage lender, we're going to help participate in your buyer's closing costs to X number of dollars. This is going to reduce the amount of money they need to bring to their transaction. Is this great? Maybe. Read the fine print. It's like any other mortgage lender. You know, they've got a yield spread and the mortgage lender is out there making a profit. You know how much they're making on the front end of that, and how much they're making on the back end servicing of this. At the end of the day, they still have to comply with all the rules that are around mortgage, so you're still going to need a settlement statement. You're still going to have to understand what that lender is charging. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, if a large builder is offering an incentive for you to use their preferred or their in-house lender, sometimes that lender's pricing isn't really in alignment with the market. Not always, but sometimes. And so they might be giving you $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $3,000 up front to fund your loan with that preferred lender. But if you really start taking a look at the pricing, you realize, well, it's basically that incentives brings me to par pricing, or it kind of gets me to, maybe it's a little bit more desirable, maybe it's not. Again, the key is awareness. It's nice to have a one-stop shop where you can go to and the transaction gets settled in a really consistent kind of way. But do your homework. I think there's a lot of wisdom in having your buyer pre-qualified, of course, before they even walk into a home builder. And then really simply ask for an estimated closing statement. Take that estimated closing statement to maybe your own lender or another lender that you normally work with and have them look at it. Does it seem reasonable? Does it seem skewed? You know, sometimes in-house lenders, in-house home builders who have lenders will say, hey, we'll match any pricing in the market. Well, that's nice, but you need to get some sort of a legitimate estimated closing statement from a legitimate lender to provide it as evidence to say, hey, Mr. Home Builder Lender, your pricing's a little bit out. Can you match this pricing? Maybe they do it, maybe they don't. Either way, what you're doing is you're demonstrating a high level of professionalism and you're taking care of your buyer, which is exactly what you should be doing. So in summary, just because a home builder has all these different affiliated companies that it's working with, flooring company, escrow, title, all these things, don't be naturally suspicious. What they're really trying to do is standardize the process so that they can get their thing accomplished in an efficient way. Remember, they're a public company and they want to deliver houses every 90 days, every quarter. Anything that stands in the way of that, like the flooring installation or loan documents or any of this other stuff, is going to reduce the efficiency of the builder. And public builders and publicly held companies just don't tolerate that kind of stuff. They really want consistency. Okay, congratulations, wake up! You made it through the entire chapter. So now you've got a pretty good understanding of how large national public branded companies are functioning, and we're going to talk a little bit more about regional builders and local builders, and there's going to be some crossover kind of depending on what specifically we're talking about with their policies, their procedures, and what their end-to-end process is. And so we got a little takeaway and some homework assignments if you want to participate in them. Number one thing I want you to do is I want you to watch this video 2 more times. It's filled with a lot of tips. It's filled with a lot of great information. I would really advise you to take notes and listen. Watch this video 2 more times. The next thing I want you to do is, I want you to go and make a list of all the publicly held companies that are currently operating in your market. So if you're in Phoenix, this is a pretty tall order because there might be 10, large nationally branded public companies working in the home building industry in Phoenix. And so not only do I want you to put the company, but what are all the actively selling neighborhoods that are associated with that company? If there's 100 or 200, it's a lot. So what I want you to do is start at ground zero, which is the very center of what you call your business, your market, and I want you to work out in a concentric circle. You might get to all of them, you might not. But I want that list. Now, you guessed it, the next thing I want you to do is, as you have identified all these sales offices, I want you to go visit them. And when you visit that sales center, I want you to ask the sales professional a couple of questions. Now, if you go during the week, the odds are that this person's not going to be as busy, so they're going to be able to spend some time with you. Ask them about what their registration policy is if you have a buyer. Some people are a little bit loose on that, but some people want the first visit, you to accompany your buyer in the first visit, sign the document, very formal. Some of these home builders are going to an online registration and put your name in, which is awesome. If you have that, take full advantage of it. So understand that process. I want you to see if they have a standard features list. So have the sales professional in that office walk you through the model home and ask, is this included? Is this included? Is this included? So usually the model homes that you're walking through have got a lot of additional fit and finish and a lot of options and upgrades. They got extra expensive flooring, landscaping, upgraded appliance package. Ask them what's standard and what's included and what's extra. They should be able to articulate this. They should be able to hand you a piece of paper and have a list of it. Ask if they've got an affiliated lender. Ask if they've got other affiliated services that might be a benefit to your home buyer. And lastly, if you have someone who's really serious, if you've got a buyer you think is really going to purchase here, ask for a sample packet of all the documents that you might have encounter in the event that your customer or your buyer does go through that buying process. And that's it. I think that's probably enough to get you started. I will see you in the next chapter.